we are going to make this falling leaves charm bracelet. I have to admit that this bracelet was inspired by one I saw recently on artbeads.com. You could see it here. It's called their chestnuts and cinnamon bracelet, and I think it's absolutely gorgeous. But what I really loved about it was that they combined charms with pearls and Swarovski crystals, and I just thought the combination was beautiful. I decided to make my bracelet fall themed. So the first thing I needed to do was color my leaf charms into more fall colors, because I didn't think these silver colors did the trick. And what I'm using today for changing the color of my charms are Ranger's Vintage Patinas. What's fantastic about these patinas is that they dry really quick, they blend together nicely, and they are formulated to stick really well to metal. Now you heard the little ball in there, and you want to be sure that it's shaking freely and that it's all mixed up. I actually kind of start out by just squeezing some onto my piece. You don't need much. A little goes a long way. And I actually will add a base coat. I've got 6 different colors here. I don't really need 6. This is just all the ones that I had in my stash that I thought would look good as fall colors. I want to not obscure all my details, so I'm going to take a paper towel and just kind of blot it. And already that looks really cool, but we'll get even cooler. Keep in mind they do dry quickly. They dry quickly in the bottle, they dry quickly on your brush. Now I'm just going to add a drop on my mat. And I'm not going to clean my brush, and so the red and the green will mix together to give you a bit of a brown. And I'm just going to dab this here and there in places, not covering the whole thing. And then I'll probably, while I have it out, I'll cover another leaf with it. And you could see you get some brown in there from the red that was already on the brush, and I've got it over the red pile here, so it's all getting kind of blended and mixed. And you just carry on like that, really. And if you think you added too much, it will kind of fill in the detail. So I like to go back with my paper towel and just dab. So put it on, take it off, put it on and take it off until you're happy with it. If you don't like messy fingers, you may want to wear gloves because these are kind of goopy and sticky. I'll have a list and links to all the materials I used. You can find that in the description box. And when you're all done, you'll end up with something like this. That looks very much like a pile of leaves you'll find in your backyard that needs raking up. I waited until after I painted my leaves to choose my pearls and crystals because I wasn't sure exactly what colors I was going to end up with in the leaves. So I pulled out some little 4mm bicones and some really bright colors for some pops, but mostly I kind of kept with woodsy, browny beiges. So I've got pearls in 3 colors and sizes. I've got bicones in 6 and 4mm and a few bead caps. For these bigger pearls, these are 8mm. I've got these larger bead caps, which I thought was so cute because they sort of look like acorns. And then for these middle-sized pearls, I got these little bead caps. Bead caps just do a lot to fancy up a project. And these ones will just be plain on little ball head pins. The next decision is to choose the chain for your bracelet. I like to choose something a little bit ornate. This was a candidate, but looking at it next to these, I thought it was just maybe a little bit heavy. And the same with this chain. I like the double chain, the multiple links linked to each other, but I thought it was maybe a little bit heavy, so I ended up going with this chain, which is similar to that last one, only a bit smaller in scale, and I thought it looked good with all of these components. So what you'll need to do is cut a piece of chain about 1 inch smaller than you want your finished bracelet to be, because the clasp takes up about 1 inch. I also pulled out this rather decorative lobster clasp. I think I got that at Fire Mountain Gems. I'll have a link to that. The next decision you'll need to make is whether or not to make wrapped loops or simple loops. You can also do a combination of the two. For example, for these big pearls with the bead caps, I really like having the ball head pin here because it kind of lends to that acorn look. This is a pretty fine gauge wire though. I think it's probably 22. Yeah, it's a little fine for making simple loops, so these will want wrapped loops, but there's a lot of components here to wrap. So I think I'm going to use these copper head pins and do simple loops with my one-step looper. These head pins came in the November 2017 dollar bead box. And when I looked at the size, I was like, wow, 0.7 millimeter, that's a pretty chunky head pin. But then I looked at them and said, those aren't 0.7 millimeter. Because usually when it says that, that means the wire size. But in this case, it doesn't. This is why I got out my little gauge to see. And actually, it's the head of the head pin that is, well, like 14 gauge. But the wire itself is 20 gauge. So good to check those things, because I was thinking that's, yeah, 0.7 millimeters, like 14 gauge, and that is not. But 20 gauge, these are hardened, I can tell, so these will be good for making simple loops. And those, of course, you can do a bunch of with your one-step loopers if you have them. Because, let's see, I think there's somewhere around 3 dozen components here that I'm going to use. I've got about a dozen pearls and a couple dozen Swarovskis and 3 dozen wrapped loops. Sounds painful. One more decision that you need to make. You can make all your wrapped loops and attach them to your chain while you're doing it, and of course that's very secure. Or you can just make them ahead of time. These rings will open. They're not soldered, I'm pretty sure. No, they're not soldered. And you can attach them later. Or you can attach them with jump rings, which is easier, although not as secure. So that's up to you. What I'm going to do is go off and probably put on a good audiobook and spend some time wire wrapping all of my pearls and my crystals. I've wired up all of my pieces. Some of them have wrapped loops, some have simple loops. And then once your dangles are all made, you want to get your bracelet length correct. So I've added my clasp and made it not snug, but just fitting. You want a little bit of room because all those charms and things will take up space. So you don't want to make it too snug or your bracelet will be uncomfortable. And then you can just lay it out and start thinking about where you're going to put things. And the way I do things like this is I usually start with the biggest and then start filling in. So we'll start with some leaves. So you just kind of get an idea of where you want them. I think I've got 2 links in between every leaf that doesn't have a leaf on it. So then you work your way down, and you can make as many or as few components. If you've watched any of my other charm bracelet videos, you know that I really love things to be very full and lush looking. So I tend to add a lot. I've got, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 14 pearl dangles in 3 different sizes. Some with big bead caps, some with little bead caps, some with no bead caps. And then the crystals, I've got 6 millimeter and 4 millimeter. And so you just start throwing them in. Like I'm going to take these brightest ones, these yellow and orange, and kind of try to space them out evenly. That looks fine. Then I'm going to take some small jump rings, 5 millimeter jump rings, and just start attaching things. I'll probably attach them in the same order that I laid them out and just start filling in until they're all filled in. It's just a matter of opening and closing jump rings and making sure things are attached securely. And these 5mm jump rings are just right for this size, depending on the size of the chain and the size of your dangles. You may need to adjust that. And that's it. It's really just a matter of collecting a bunch of things, making a bunch of loops, and attaching them all to your chain, and you have a really great bracelet.